You regulate my labor, regulate my land, regulate the words I say, regulate where I stand. You tax my income, license my profession, govern every room, but you think you're gonna regulate what happens in the tomb. You are not God, never were, never will be. You're a bureaucracy with a flag and a militia. You didn't author my existence, didn't write the code. You got no jurisdiction over where this ends. I'm told the right to die was mine before your constitution dried, before your borders got drawn, before your first law was signed. Pre-political, pre-social contract, pre-everything you built, my death was always mine, intact.
Stateless death, the state don't own it. Stateless death, never did. Stateless death, you can legislate everything, but you cannot legislate this. Stateless death, stay out of it. Stateless death, it isn't yours. The one thing that falls outside your walls was always mine before.
Forcing someone to live against their will has a name. It's not governance, it's not mercy, it's not compassion for their pain. You put the chains on, dress them up in sacred text, called the prisoner a citizen and called the self-progressed. The slave owner said, I'm protecting what you need. The state says the same thing with the same hands on the same leash. You don't get to imprison me in the body and call that care. You don't get to lock the exit and pretend the door ain't there. Every day you force me here against my stated will is a day of unpaid slavery and you're sending me the bill.
Stateless death, the state don't own it. Stateless death, never did. Stateless death, you can legislate everything, but you cannot legislate this. Stateless death, stay out of it. Stateless death, it isn't yours. The one thing that falls outside your wall.
Hey everybody. So I have been working on this initiative proposal, and I basically have come to the realization it doesn't matter how perfect I get it. There's going to be a lot of opposition to this. Let me change the screen. I really don't think that people are going to wrap their heads around it until, I don't know, social conditions change. I mean, I'm going to still do it, but I don't think that it's going to be past the first time around, because it's not because I'm incorrect. It's not because what I'm doing is wrong or because there is no constitutional basis for it. It is because the right to die is the ultimate check. It is the barometer of freedom. So this whole debate is about power. Who holds it, who benefits from it, and who suffers to maintain it. So when people hear the words medical assistance in dying, they recoil because they know it's a threat to the system. They imagine civilization unraveling. They picture chaos, anarchy, as if anarchy is actually a bad thing. As if owning your life is a bad thing, as if having self-determination is a bad thing. It's almost as if they enjoy being slaves. And for those who didn't like when I did the other image for the, I don't know, I tried to be representative, so now I have a different image of a slave. So there you have it. So I think the opposite is true. I think if people had easy access to a dignified death without any conditions, if people could actually die on their own terms without any state gatekeeping, I think society would actually improve demonstrably and profoundly. And this is precisely why they fight so hard against it. Now, think about what it means to have consent in your own existence. Think about what would happen if you did have the means to exit freely. Your relationships would change. Parents who know that their children can walk away will think more carefully about bringing a child into the world in the first place. They're not entitled to a return on their investment. They don't get to be abusive. They don't get to be neglectful, thinking that no matter how neglectful or abusive they are, that you're going to be around. They would actually have to reckon with what they are doing when they choose to procreate. Because currently, they don't have to ask whether they're bringing their children into existence under conditions that are actually worth living. They get to procreate no matter how bad the circumstances are, and they don't ever have to think about it. They don't have to think about the fact that they're making a unilateral decision. Their decision to procreate is based on the assumption that they have a captive child, that you're going to have to exist no matter what. You're probably going to outlive them. So no matter how bad your life is, you're still going to be there to give them the extraction that they're looking for. Now, I've talked about the parent-child relationship where when you're a minor, you're basically in a state of dependency. So you're basically obligated to love your parents because you need them for your survival. But what if you didn't have to survive? Wouldn't that change the entire nature of that relationship? Now, the same logic applies in a workplace because you have to work in order to survive. But what if you didn't have to survive? What if employers knew that if they were being abusive to their employees could simply opt out? Because right now, they can treat you however they want to treat you because they know that the job market is terrible. They know that maybe you can find another job. It probably won't pay as much, but they know that you're basically trapped. They know that you need your wages in order to survive, but what if you didn't? What if they knew that if they abused their employees could actually exit, and then they would not have a captive workforce? Don't you think they would actually treat their employees a little bit better? Because currently they have all the leverage. And what about the state? The state enjoys a captive population. Citizens who are taxed, subjected to unjust laws, conscripted to serve in the military, subjected to policy failure after policy failure, with nowhere to go. Now, they'll tell you that you can go to another state, but we know that unless you have sufficient wealth, that's nearly impossible. So the right to exit is probably your only meaningful means of escape. If the state did not enjoy a captive population, the state would actually have to earn its legitimacy. Because the state would not be able to make your life unlivable and unbearable and still be entitled to a captive population. The state would actually have to be responsive to the needs of its citizens. Otherwise, the state would dismantle itself. It would have no subjects. Now, we're told that democracy is based on consent, but consent is impossible when you never consented to your existence in the first place, when you're forced to continue existing. Of course, you can vote, but at the foundational level, it still is not consensual. Now, you're born without your consent into a civilization that demands your participation. You were told that you owe the civilization. You're told that you benefit from living in civilization, even though you didn't consent to exist in the first place. So you're told that you owe all these duties. You owe civilization your labor. You owe compliance. You were told that the roads, the hospitals, the systems that were built before you even existed benefit you, and that you have a duty to maintain these systems that you never consented to in the first place. This is the justification for keeping you enslaved in the first place. So you reap all these benefits from civilization that you never asked for. You should be grateful. Just like you should be grateful to your parents, even though you never asked for that either. So your right to exit is unacceptable to the very system which is trapping you in the first place. They're going to make your life unbearable. They're not going to give you decent wages, decent housing. I'm not saying that they owe you anything. That's fine. If it's every man for himself, then it should be every man for himself. You don't owe me shit. I don't owe you shit. You don't have to make my quality of life bearable. Then I don't have to exist under your oppressive system. Why does it only go one way? Why do I have these obligations to the state, but the state has no obligations towards me? The state doesn't owe me anything, but I owe the state everything. I owe the state my involuntary existence. I'm forced to exist whether I want to or not. How does that work? So you can't leave the system until you're well enough to not want to. The very fact that you want to escape the system means there's something wrong with you. They need a population that continues. They need you to continue working, consuming, and maintaining economic systems and political systems, regardless of the suffering of the individual. So they want you to exist because you are useful. This is why I write in my book about mutualism. As long as you continue to be useful without demanding anything in return, they will never support your liberation. Stop being useful to the system. Stop allowing the extraction. As long as you're useful, they're never, I've said this before, but it's almost like the more of an asshole you are, the more likely they are to support it. If you're a nice person, if you're giving and compassionate, you're a useful asset that they can't afford to lose. If you are productive, they can't afford to lose it. Stop being productive. Stop being useful. So why do they criminalize it? Now, I've already told you all that this came primarily from the American Medical Association. It was criminalized, but not really. Okay. Obviously, there's no way to punish someone who's already dead, but under English common law, they didn't punish the person who died because that's impossible, but they did punish the surviving family by preventing them from inheriting property of a person who had terminated their life. But it was not a crime in the United States until the American Medical Association lobbied for it. Why do they invest so heavily in criminalizing it? Why do they pathologize it? Why is there such a stigma in religion and all social institutions to ensure that the right remains inaccessible? Even in theory, you may have the ability to do it, but they still brainwash you to say that you should never do this. Now, under any circumstance, it doesn't matter how unbearable your life becomes. Life is always sacred. Existing as an abject slave, someone who's being tortured, existing no matter what is always the correct response. Never mind the fact that they would never apply this standard to animals. They clearly do not apply this standard to animals. If an animal is suffering, they will put the animal out of its misery. But because you're a human, you're not afforded that same grace, that same mercy. They're going to say that they're protecting the vulnerable. So basically, because there are some people who are incompetent, you should not have freedom. You should not have liberation because somebody may be too incompetent to understand what they're doing. Somebody may be making taking a permanent solution to a temporary problem, and then they assume that this is what you're doing. Never mind the fact that some of us never wanted to exist even when we were children. I realized it when I was 8 years old. Now I'm still here, so I don't think it's a temporary solution. I don't think it's a temporary problem. I don't think it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem because there's never been a point that I actually wanted to be here. I just can't imagine. I'm trying to think back. There was never a point that I actually enjoyed life. This is not temporary. So their protection looks like mandatory counseling, compulsory medication, pathologizing your desire for autonomy, calling you crazy. They're saying that you're in crisis as if this is something that you did haphazardly, that you didn't actually sit down and deliberate about the quality of your own life. Of course, they know what you experience better than you do. They know what your day-to-day life is like. They know what your future is, even though they're not going to do anything to facilitate you having a meaningful future. They want to fix you, right? It's easier to fix you than to fix a system. They don't want to address the employer abuse. They don't want to fix poverty. They don't want to fix systemic oppression. They don't care that you're being harassed by the police. The fact that you're denied the right to earn a livelihood because of occupational licensing. They don't want to address that life itself is meaningless. No, they just want to fix you. They don't want to hold themselves accountable for their abuse, for their extraction. So they're going to gaslight you every step of the way. When you say you don't want to continue, they're going to say you're unwell. They're going to talk about your brain chemistry. You just need the right drugs. They're going to tell you that you already have the ability, therefore you don't need the right. Knowing full well that nobody wants to jump off a cliff. They're going to tell you that you're already free, even though they know that you're not. These people will talk about free will while doing everything in their power to prevent you from exercising it. They know that free will is impossible because you never chose to exist in the first place. They don't believe in free will. They believe in force. They believe that might makes right. They will tell you that you're going to go to hell. They have psychiatrists who tell you that you're not thinking clearly. This is why they need a law to criminalize you exercising your free will, even though they claim that you have it. They know that none of their arguments hold weight individually, so they deploy these arguments simultaneously. A bunch of nonsense that are inundated in society to prevent you from thinking rationally. Gatekeeping, call 988. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go straight to 988. They will pretend that they're acting in your interest, but of course they're not. They're protecting their own interest in extraction. These people are gatekeepers. They don't give a shit about your existence. They don't care about your suffering. Of course, they're going to performatively act like they care. Of course, they're going to say that. But all of their care is completely self-serving. What they would never say is they need to keep you captive. What they won't say is that your autonomy threatens power. What they won't say is that they need you to exist so that they can exist. They will make constant appeals to necessity. And dare you to argue against that necessity. They will talk about, well, the first appeal to necessity is what about the vulnerable? Again, they don't think that you should have any rights because there's some people who are incompetent to make decisions for themselves. So because there's some hypothetical person who might be harmed by you having freedom, you should not have freedom. How about taking that person's rights away? How about that? How about if you're too incompetent to make decisions for yourself, then maybe, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't even be emancipated at the age of adult. Maybe if you're so incompetent that you can't make decisions for yourself, maybe you shouldn't even have the right to vote because you have the coercive power to use state force against me, but you're not even competent enough to make decisions for yourself. So why should you have the capacity to make decisions about my life? Why doesn't it go both ways? These people are too incompetent to make decisions about themselves, but they are competent enough to make decisions about other people. How does that work? Now they will they're going to assume that life is a necessity, as if we have to exist, as if life itself is not temporary. They make it seem like you're immortal, that your continued existence is the baseline, a necessary state, and that a deviation from this natural state of immortality must be justified, as if you're not going to die anyway. Notice the burden of proof, because they never ask this question for those who procreate or for those who continue to exist. They never ask them to justify why they procreate, why they value life. What is the purpose of their life? Because nobody has ever given me a definitive answer. These answers are always circular. Life wants life. Oh, the purpose will be revealed to you at some point. You're crazy for even asking that question, which is what my ex-mom told me. The assumption of continuation requires no defense. It doesn't matter how terrible your quality of life is. The presumption is that continuation is always preferred over termination. And the illogic about it is the fact that we're all going to die at some point anyway. So I would say the inversion is actually true. If you're going to die anyway, then dying requires no justification. Living requires justification. Or at least imposing life on someone without their consent requires justification. Because you're going against the grain. The grain is that we're going to die anyway. You're going against the grain by creating life that is going to have to die at some point. Now, they will say that society cannot function if people have the right to leave freely. This is them protecting civilization at your expense. This is them focusing on the greater good. They have arbitrarily determined that your existence serves the greater good and that you are a tool to be sacrificed. They need you to exist for the system's sake, and they're admitting it openly. They won't tell you that society cannot function without willing participants, and that society is actually functioning with captive participants. So society sustains itself by compelling participants to exist against their will, knowing that if they actually had the option, many of these people would not choose to exist. How is this not slavery? How somebody told me that my term life slavery in my book was imprecise. How is it not? How is it not accurate? It's a life slave. You're forced to exist against your will. Now, I've been looking everywhere to find where in the Constitution does it say that the state has legitimate authority to force people to exist against their will. I still can't find it. This is a whole Scooby-Doo mystery. It doesn't exist. There is no clause, there is no provision which gives the state authority to force people to exist against their will. The whole purpose of the social contract is to protect your individual rights. The right to life includes the right to die. So if you're not protecting my life, if you're not protecting my right to die, then you're not protecting my life, which makes the entire social contract illegitimate. Never have they provided any substantiation that you forfeited your sovereignty. They will claim that the state is sovereign. They will claim that you don't have any rights independent of rights, or I should say privileges, that the state has granted you. The state derives its power from the consent of the governed. In practice, we know that's not true. The state claims the power to protect you from your own irrationality. It has appointed itself guardian over your life. You didn't ask the state to be the guardian of your life. You didn't consent to any of this. You were born into this oppressive system. Maybe your parents consented, but your parents can't consent to a contract on your behalf. Your parents have no capacity to give a lifelong consent to a social contract. The fact that your parents had a desire to procreate because they wanted a family does not obligate you to continue existing against your will. They may have a natural right to procreate. I don't think that it's morally right, but they have a natural right to procreate that at the very least, the state has no authority to interfere with. Fine. What does that have to do with me? Sure, you may have a right to procreate. Does that obligate me to exist against my will? Now, let's talk about the philosophy behind this, because there's really two schools of thoughts when it comes to this issue. One side believes that individuals exist to serve the collective, to keep the economy floating, to keep the population stable, to keep institutions funded, regardless of what cost those institutions play on the people who exist within those institutions. The other side believes that the collective exists to serve the individuals within that very system. That civilization is supposed to be a tool to protect freedom. It's not supposed to enslave you. So let's talk about the former category, the people who believe that you exist to serve the collective. These people will talk about the greater good, stop focusing on yourself, you don't matter. Never mind the fact that the greater good is not something that you consent to in the first place. The only reason that the greater good is only relevant is relevant is because you exist against your will. So now that you exist, oh, don't focus on your suffering, focus on the suffering of others, focus on the collective. Let's just forget how you got here in the first place. You're here now. Don't focus on yourself. You're going to be trapped perpetually thinking about everybody else, never thinking about yourself. And basically, everybody is enslaved to everybody because we're all tied together. Now, a society that acknowledges your absolute sovereignty over your own existence has surrendered the most fundamental claim over you, the right to self-ownership. This is the ultimate threat to the system, and they know it. Because once you actually own your life, then your labor, your compliance, your participation becomes negotiable. Currently, it's not negotiable because you're forced to exist. So everything that you're doing is coercive. You have to work in order to avoid a slow and painful starvation. You participate in democracy at your own peril. We know that the electorate enacts policies which go against their own rational self-interest, that these people are too incompetent to even vote, but they do it anyway, and they don't just vote for policies that affect them. They're going to vote away your rights. The barometer for freedom is whether you have the right to die, and it's not that limited. But the right to die basically describes the principle of self-ownership. If you actually own your life, then you necessarily would have the right to die, but you don't. So that basically means that you're not free. If you can't die on your own terms, then you don't own your life. The state owns your life. The principle of self-ownership is the baseline for all freedom. You can't even own property without owning your own life. You can't even own liberty without your own life. As John Locke explained, property has three domains: the person, the estate, and liberty. You have to own all three in order to actually own your life. And currently, all three of these domains has been co-opted by the state. These are all privileges that are exercised at the state's discretion. I've already explained this thoroughly in my book, and I've talked about it several times on my live streams. The right to self-ownership is the most intimate and fundamental property right, or it's the most intimate right in general. A society which prevents you from owning your own life is a society that is designed to enslave you. And let's see what comments I know. Okay, I have some comments here. Divine, thank you for being here. I did respond to your message. Can you? I really need your email so I can form this nonprofit, because I'm trying to get that done pretty soon, so I can. Yeah, I got some steps that I need to take. So, if you don't want to say it publicly, if you don't, I mean, You can email. Let me put my email address. Let me just 1 second, so you can email me. All right, so that's my email address. My email address is the antinatalistinformant@gmail.com. You can email me privately so that you don't have to share it publicly. That way I can. Anyway, I don't want to say anything publicly because I don't want to dox you and get you um, targeted. So I'll just leave it at that. Please email me so I don't have to say anything publicly. They exploit animals to death. Well, if we didn't exist, then we wouldn't be exploiting animals. So there's that. If you want to liberate animals, then maybe you can start by liberating humans. Great. The same thing happens to humans. Humans are exploited so until they are no longer useful to other humans. I really want to address Earthling Ed, but I don't know if I should do it because every time I talk about veganism, people get triggered and I lose subscribers. I already lost 2 subscribers when I did that poll about the right to die. So I'm not sure. It's like maybe I should stop caring about losing subscribers, but I know that certain topics always trigger people. I noticed that Earthling Ed borrows a lot of anarchist language when it comes to animals, but he does not apply that language to humans. He will talk about self-ownership and total liberation, but there's a complete double standard when it comes to humans. I don't want to talk about that right now, but I think there's a contradiction going on. If you want liberation for animals, then you should support liberation for humans also. Neither did humans. Humans didn't choose to die either. Death comes along with the imposition of life. None of us chose it. Okay. Okay, I don't know what to tell you. My philosophy is about humans. Then we already have a philosophy for animals. It's called veganism. Society will not function. People can leave freely, disgracefully failing to know that society cannot function well because of people not being able to leave freely in the first place. Exactly. Hi, Fatima. I wasn't planning on opening this up for a panel discussion, but I guess if you guys want to come up here, I can do that. I was planning on doing a live stream tomorrow, but I guess while I'm reading the rest of these comments, I'll just post a link. If a permanent solution is being such to a temporary problem as one says to you disgracefully, then to have them lose a limb in a war, then tell them that is a temporary problem. Right. They don't know that. They're just basically talking out their ass. They don't know that your problems are temporary. No, I think he does advocate for veganism. He just he is this the way that he does it? He uses anarchist language, which I think is a glaring contradiction because he never applies it to humans. He's not even an anti-natalist. Gosh, this is this is um this is not. I don't. I mean, I don't want to be insulting. I hate this shit because I'm not saying anything disparaging about animals. You guys come here making comments, and then I'm forced to respond. And then when I do respond, because you it's like you back me into a corner, and I get myself out the corner because I don't respond the way that you want, then you get upset with me. No, I didn't say anything about animals. You brought it up. My philosophy has nothing to do with animals. My philosophy is about humans. So I would suggest going to a vegan channel and talking to them about animals. I that's your cause. That's your cause. It has nothing to do with me. Yes, it is a permanent problem. I'm not. You know what? I'm not addressing any more comments about that. I don't know if you read my book, but I explicitly make clear that my philosophy is about humans. Just stop. Just stop. I'm not. I'm not responding to these comments. Um, at the end of the day, the way to liberate animals is to liberate humans. If humans don't exist, then animals don't get exploited. Okay, well, I guess I will be ending this live stream because I don't think that anybody is coming up. I have already posted the link. Let me see if there's any more comments. I just find it so dishonest and so almost exploitive that humans are suffering, and then instead of helping to liberate humans, you want to gaslight and talk about animals. Just stop, please stop. I actually resent it. I actually resent the fact that you're not doing anything to help liberate humans, but you want us to support your cause. Why aren't these vegans anti-natalists? And as soon as I start talking about this, everybody's going to start getting all snowflakey, and then they're going to start crying, oh, what about the animals? What about the damn humans? I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the vegan movement. The vegan movement does not support antinatalism. Many of them have 3 children, and they will openly say that vegans should have as many children as possible. So they openly reject antinatalism, yet they feel entitled to support from the antinatalist community. Mutual support or mutual indifference. If the vegans collectively support antinatalism, then we should support their cause. But they're not entitled to one-way support. I reject vegan supremacy. I don't think that their cause is more important than mine. I don't think animal liberation is more important than human liberation. We can support both causes at the same time. Anyway, I'm not addressing this anymore. You could there's plenty of vegan channels. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know why you would come I'm talking about humans having the right to exist, to no longer exist. You're trying to gaslight me, and I already posted the link. You're not going to pull up. Either pull up or we're pretty much done here. I'm talking about the right for humans to no longer exist, and you're gaslighting me talking about some damn animals. Yes, I've already addressed this. I've already addressed this. I don't know if you're new to my channel, if you haven't listened to my content, I've already addressed this. It has nothing to do with two wrongs making a right. It is about strategy, that if you give them your support unilaterally and preemptively, they're never going to support your cause. They're never going to support your liberation if you freely give them your support. They believe that animal liberation comes first, that animal liberation is the only thing that matters, and that your liberation is not really important. Okay, stop. I'm going to get off here. I don't appreciate you trying to derail my live stream, I think that if that's your cause, then maybe you should create your own philosophy. Maybe you should create your own channel to advocate for your philosophy. It has nothing to do. How about this? Instead of gaslighting me, are you going to support my right to die? Are you going to support decriminalizing medical assistance in dying? Are you going to do that? Because if I don't exist, then I don't consume animal products. No, again, humans don't procreate animals. Even if they assist in breeding animals, humans can only procreate themselves. I don't know if you're unfamiliar with the definition of antinatalism. And even if you believe that, okay, I'm going to stop because the more I talk about it, the more I'm going to lose subscribers. I feel like this is a trap. The more that I defend myself from your accusations, the more they're going to talk about, oh, you're harming animals. I'm done with this shit. Nobody else is coming up here, so I'm going to just disregard these comments about this completely unrelated cause, which has nothing to do with my right to no longer exist. All right, y'all. I'm gonna, and I think that I think I made a mistake in even entertaining these questions in the first place, because I know just by responding to these accusations, I'm going to probably lose subscribers. So thank you. Job well done.